Let's get started. I wanted to start with a little bit about Copilot Studio Saturdays for everybody who's not familiar. This is, after all, our very first meeting. So before I go very far, I want to say thank you for registering. Thank you for joining. It's a Saturday morning and try to do this across time zones. And I feel like if we keep doing this for a few months, more people will eventually start showing up. That's been my experience with most of the communities that I've been a part of, that I've helped build. By background, I've been part of a few others, one's called the International Association of Microsoft Channel Partners. That's a mouthful. IAMCP is the acronym. It's a global organization or association for Microsoft partners. We see the same trend. You keep doing it over and over again, more people come. Or the Business Central user group. Or more recently, we've been doing a Copilot Studio Houston meetup, and we're starting to see some momentum building over there as well. So I'm going to share my screen before presentations begin and give a little bit of background, give you a little bit of some thought process history into what's going on with Copilot Studio Saturdays, with what we're looking to accomplish. Let me know when you can see my screen.
So we see it.
Yeah, we
All
see
right.
it.
So the idea behind Copilot Studio Saturdays started when shortly after I came up with the Copilot Studio Houston meetup alongside another MVP, Vlad Sarov and Igor Shvets. Igor lives in Dallas and he drives about 4 hours every time we're having a meeting. But as we would advertise those meetings, we would hear from people. They would always want to know, are we recording the meetings? Are they going to be online? One of my experiences from IAMCP, the other organization that I talked about, has been that when I put a meeting, or when we host a meeting that is both online and in person, we tend to see a drop off in the in-person attendees, because people figure, hey, I can watch this later, or I can watch this online and don't have to come in. So we wanted to keep that separate. And then I reached out to a couple of other MVP friends of mine, and I was encouraged by your response and your willingness to help me. And we said, you know what, we're going to start a community. And so the fun part about this, by the way, we're in the age of vibe coding. I think vibe coding can be a bit of a derogatory term at times. I call it like AI assisted coding. This entire website was built with an AI assisted developer of about $500 or $600 in credits, about 50 hours of human time, kind of going through the process and the mechanism that a human works with a marketing agency, creating brand guides and journeys and so on. Some other time I would love to show you all everything that happens in the background, but everything, including the event management system, was done with AI. And I thought it'd be a fun project. Then we built it. The goal behind this community is, of course, free education on Copilot Studio, and to try to make it available to as many people as possible. And that means reaching out to people in different languages. There is always going to be a lot of content in English. It just tends to be the default technical language, whether people like it or not, for a lot of this type of content. And we think there is a real opportunity here if we can find community leaders in different languages and who can host meetings just like this at different time zones if they have to meet the communities where they are and make these videos available. So as we created the website, we already started with 9 different languages where the UI is translated. If you are a native speaker of one of these languages, I encourage you to take a look at it and give any feedback on how good or bad the AI translation is. If you have a language that you would like represented here, let me know. I would love to add it. I just didn't want to have 100 languages at rollout because the upkeep would be very difficult. And so we started with a handful of languages. That's a starting point. The goal is that all of our content is going to be ungated. There is not going to be a requirement for a login to view content. Everything you're seeing here on upcoming events, as this meeting finishes at about 10:30, it's going to show up under past events. And in past events, you are going to be able to search multiple events as they happen. There'll be a YouTube link right in there, and you'd be able to watch it right from the screen. But if you want to see the full YouTube features, there'll be a button for you to click and go to the YouTube website. We encourage people who are interested in either speaking, let me start with the speaking side, to share your information. This community is only as strong as the people that come and share their knowledge, right? If I am the one presenting every time, or me and two other people or three other people are presenting every time. Yes, it's good. It keeps community going, but we're really missing out on viewpoints and opportunities to get this community more vibrant and robust. So if you have something that you like to share, please send this out over here. The goal too that we have is not just languages, but over time, as this community builds out, we might do 1 month a Saturday or one Saturday a month more around beginner content and something that's a little more technical in another Saturday of the month. So there's a lot of opportunities, but we wanted to commit to at least having a community meeting each month on a Saturday in English. And then the other two commitments that we have at this point in time are in Spanish and potentially in Turkish. So, Roberto, if he has joined, I don't know if he has, he did register. He may not have made it just yet. Roberto Correa, who is a fellow MVP for Business Central and very, very engaged with Copilot Studio. He does a lot of content in Spanish and in English. He has graciously volunteered and agreed to do that in Spanish. Niloufer has expressed interest. I think Niloufer is going through a move and so on. So hopefully we'll get her very soon with Turkish content. I am bilingual as well with English and Turkish. Not quite sure how I will feel about presenting in Turkish just yet. And we have somebody who's expressed interest in presenting in Portuguese. So we hope that we're going to continue to build and strengthen the community with all of this. So do check us out. At this point in time, the join community feature doesn't necessarily do much else than help us get a name of people that we can get to when these events happen. With LinkedIn, there's a good and a bad thing. People do join a LinkedIn group, and I'll show you our LinkedIn group in just a little bit. On LinkedIn groups, we don't have a way to absolutely ensure that our community is being reached. The algorithm sometimes sends something out or notifies people about a week later or 2 weeks later, and you're seeing things that have already happened in arrears. And this way, with when you're joined to the community, you will have an opportunity to participate and hear from us as soon as events are happening. Registrations are also being handled from Microsoft Teams, like those of you who registered. So that's another way for us to do that. But what I don't want to do out of privacy concerns is I do not want to take somebody who's registered for a meeting and forcefully join them into a community. To join the community is going to be something that is entirely your prerogative and your choice. And I encourage you to consider it. Now, one of the other things we had to do as we were building this website is ensure that it was GDPR compliant. So those of you joining from Europe are probably seeing a little cookie at the bottom. If you're not, please tell me after the meeting because we tested with European geographies and made sure the little cookie acceptance thing, the cookie consent forms would show up. We want to be very respectful of everybody's privacies and everybody's concerns for privacy. So as we continue to build this out, there will be more and more things over here. Our goal ultimately is to create member experiences that are going to go above and beyond just meetings. Today, for instance, before the meeting is up, we're going to select three random winners who will get some merchandise and some swag from your choice of merchandise or swag from Copilot Studio Saturdays. And our goal eventually is to create member engagement and sign points and gamify a little bit, possibly do a member card as well for Copilot Studio Saturdays. So we're going to have some wallet cards on iPhones and Android phones, and we will have free swag that we give out for different levels of participation. Come to so many meetings, and maybe present those things will get you different levels of points, and we'll get you more free swag with Copilot Studio and Copy, our mascot. Which brings us nicely to our mascot, Copy, short for Copilot, a Jetsons-like character, a friendly guide for our community who will grace our screens at different points. You refresh the page, you'll see different versions of Copy. If you're like me and you like swag, there's one of two ways you can make that happen. One is you can get free digital swag. We have a GitHub repo where we don't just have digital swag, but we also have some other resources that you will find might be useful. You can always go down and it's github.com/Copilot Studio Saturdays. And you can download any of these different Copy poses, Copy doing fun stuff, including Copy over the eras, how he would have looked like in the 1970s and in today's world and in the future. But then on to some more serious stuff as well, right? This part is just to keep us a little bit engaged and have some fun. But we also want to create a lot of information for you to quickly access. Today, one of the sessions that we have is going to be around pricing and pay as you go. And in that session, I will reference these, but some of these are going to be very helpful, like a pricing LinkedIn carousel. This carousel was shared on LinkedIn a while back, I think about a week or 2 weeks ago, explaining how the pricing works. There's also a one pager and a infographic type of format of that as well for people who want to get some questions answered about when does an agent that you build from Copilot Studio get built. So those types of resources will also be available and continue to grow and be available on Copilot Studio Saturdays. And we'll have some other resources like speaker resources, PowerPoint templates as well. So, keep that in mind. If you'd like some digital swag, you can grab that over here. I also encourage you, while I've told you that LinkedIn sometimes doesn't get in front of people all that much, or this was one of the posts from the news. I'll come back to this in a second. If you go to groups and search for Copilot Studio Saturdays, we'll also be doing some engagement over here. I've started to do a once a week quiz, just a question we ask on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and on a Friday, we'll answer what that question is. Will be other forms of engagement and a newsletter as well to boot. So we are hoping to create an ecosystem where, we foster and encourage anything about Copilot Studio to be shared. So with that, let's get into the first part of our agenda, which is what's new in Copilot Studio. So what I like to do is I clip things as the week progresses. And this week was a very, very busy week. So I'm actually going to pick things not necessarily in the order that they were announced, but in the order of what I think is significance. A very important announcement that happened a couple of days ago was a visual workflow designer. So Jack Robotham basically announced it. And what this does, and I'll also go into Copilot Studio and quickly show you, this is an alternative way of working with agent flows. It does look like there are some other capabilities beyond agent flows as well in here, but this only works in preview environments. So for those of you, by the way, who don't know this shortcut to get to Copilot Studio, aka.ms/mcsprod. And when you're here, I have multiple environments, but only in the early release or what are called preview environments will I see features like the one that I just showed you. So let me jump into one of those right over here. And the URL then will show me in a second, copilotstudio.preview.microsoft.com. And that's my indicator too that we're there. You'll notice for those of you who are avid agent builders that this icon looks just a wee bit different. So if you go to automate a workflow here, unlike agent flows, which typically start with when an agent calls and then you build everything. Of course, you can do other types, but that's the traditional way. Here you're getting something that's a little more workflow style driven with a different type of palette and presentation. You have a lot of standard capabilities. The human review seems a little bit different than human in the loop that we had for Copilot Studio, which is typically based around email. There is also an M365 Copilot connector that is a nice little tie-in, and of course with your prompt builders and other agents that you might tie in. So agents being called from within this visual workflow. For people keeping count, I think, or people keeping track, I think Microsoft announced something like this for Foundry at Ignite last year. So we have some of those as well. So this is very interesting, among other things. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to try it out yet. If you do, I'll pause for a second. I'd love to hear what your experience has been like. All right. So I'm not hearing anything. If you want to speak up at any time, you're welcome to unmute yourselves. I don't want to force anybody to remain muted. Now, going back in here, by the way, at least in the standard environments, flows haven't completely gone away. So if you look at a traditional Power Automate or agent flow that's been created, it's still showing those in that new Express or the fast design view. So those are there as well. In fact, if you do a new flow, that's when you're going to see that. So I think we're now going to enter the world of classic flow and a new type flow, kind of what we experienced with Copilot Studio when we had the old bots versus the new agents. But some of your legacy stuff will still show up as that over there. So I think this is going to be a real step up. It's going to give us a different way of thinking about taking deterministic flows and then mapping agents to other agents or connecting agents to other agents, or also connecting M365 Copilot and possibly Work IQ responses in there. So I'm looking forward to doing some fun stuff with that. So that was one of the things that caught my eye a lot this week. That was a big deal. Also, some other things, by the way, a webinar from the PowerCat team. For those of you who are not familiar, the CAT team for Microsoft is a group of folks within the Copilot Studio team who create a lot of great content. That content goes everywhere from the Copilot Studio Kit. If you haven't used that, we are going to have a session on the Copilot Studio Kit next month. That's on the agenda. Any power agent maker, and I don't mean like power as a power platform, but anybody who really wants to make powerful agents, you should be looking at Copilot Studio Kit. There is so much buried in it, but this session is going to be more technical. It's really for folks who are of the pro developer ilk, and you might want to take a look at what's going to be going over there. So how do you create better integration patterns with Copilot Studio? Saudi and Giorgio are going to be presenting that. They also have a blog for the CAT team. For those of you who are not familiar, by the way, I was very sad when collections we found out were being retired. That's unfortunately not a very good place, but let's go down over here, see if I can find the PowerCat blog. Maybe for next month. I have it in here, but it's probably buried multiple pages down. So for the next month, I'm going to make sure that I actually list the URL for the Copilot Studio blog as well. Now, there's two Copilot Studio blogs. The other one is actually the Microsoft Communities blog. I'll include a link for that as well. So that's on the one place, and then the CAT team has a blog all to themselves where they share a lot of content as well. Another update that came to Copilot Studio is the agent status. So Rafsan did a nice little write up on that. You can go check that out as well. Basically, on the right hand side of your agent in the panel, you can now see the status of your agent, and it is going to flag your warnings and your issues before you ever get to the published state. So it's more preemptive. It makes that, again, I think as an agent maker, it saves you a little bit of time when you get there. On the 7th of May, Microsoft announced that both for Copilot and M3 and Copilot Studio, we're going to get GPT 5.5. So that's another big deal. That's the latest from OpenAI. Now, of course, at this point in time, we're seeing a real kind of neck and neck competition between the Claude models as well as the GPT models. And you may have noticed, some of you may have noticed that your agents by default are being made in Claude, and Claude Sonnet 4.6 is the default model for the agent. Now, that is happening because of the, I think, heavy load, as I understand, on the GPT models that are out there within the Microsoft managed OpenAI set of models. And so if you've enabled Anthropic, Microsoft is allowing those Anthropic models to become the default. And if you haven't, it will default you back to, I think at this point, GPT-5, if I recall correctly. Still, you could manually switch back to the OpenAI models if that is something you prefer to do. So you're going to find that the 5.5 models are going to be available in both of those at this point in time. Now, the other thing, if you know Dwayne Robinson, he used to be the Copilot dude, or I think the agent dude. He had was his name. He's changed that a little bit. He's doing more than just standard Copilot Studio fare. It is still Copilot Studio related, but he's talking and creating content around the ecosystem in general. So check out this new one that he did about how to use the Copilot Studio plugin for Claude Code and for the GitHub Copilot command line interface. So his stuff is always cool to watch. I learn a lot so that's always good whenever he has something like that put up there. For those of you who are using the Copilot Studio Kit, the agent debugger, or there's a new agent debugger. This is one more reason among many others to be looking at Copilot Studio Kit and not just building a Copilot Studio agents by yourself. For those of you who've never heard of this, this is basically a little app source app, and there's a couple ways to install it, but an app source app is one way. You install this, it installs it into your environment, and you're going to see some extra prompts that have been built out. You're going to see a couple of other extra knickknacks. There's, I think, even one agent built out with some topics around different types of adaptive cards and so on and so forth. So here, what's really cool about this particular debugger is it will show you your performance timeline and debug information, and it'll help you get to your root cause in seconds. So really quick way to get there. It is already available through the latest version of Copilot Studio Kit in App Source. One thing for anybody who's used Copilot Studio Kit for a little bit, you have to make sure that it's getting updated. Just by installing from App Source, I don't believe will keep you on the latest and greatest version. So you may need to run updates from time to time. So do keep that in mind. So that is the kind of long and short of the what's new. I may have had one or two other things in another resource that's going to come out in a newsletter. Before I get into sessions, I wanted to open the floor up again for anybody who wanted to share something exciting about Copilot Studio that maybe I didn't talk about that's worthy of being mentioned. No? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
A question. So the flow interface that you showed before, is it going to replace the Power Automate interface, or is it just for agents?
Well, at this point in time, there's nothing said about Power Automate. Already, there was that fork where we had Power Automate and then we had agent flows. And agent flows were living inside of Copilot Studio, and they were working on the Copilot Studio billing plan alongside credits. And if you were working in Power Automate, you were typically working with the Power Automate premium per user plan. Plan wise, too, there's a little bit of dichotomy. Functionality wise, they were similar but not identical. There was definitely that branching out we were seeing between the two. This interface definitely has only been announced at this point in time for Copilot Studio. Who knows if in the future we'll go down that other way?
Okay. Thanks so much.
You bet. Anybody else? All right. So with that, let's go into the first of two presentations. The first presentation that we're going to have today is going to be around the pay-as-you-go functionality for Copilot Studio. I brought this up because the last two conferences I was at, that was a conversation that happened again and again. How do I license Copilot Studio? Do I have to buy credits? How do credits get consumed? Pay as you go. How do I set it up? Where do I do it? And I thought it would be a good quick walkthrough. And then there's a slightly longer walkthrough as well on my YouTube channel where I have a link to that on the presentation slides just after that. So let me minimize this screen and go into the PowerPoint slide once more. All right. So for pay-as-you-go billing setup in Copilot Studio, there are a handful of slides, but after the slides, I'll actually show you a quick live demo of an environment that's already been configured, but I'll walk through all the stops so you know where to go. You will at times find that you may need to have a little bit of a wait in some cases, but the process itself is absolutely simple. So the story always starts with you having to do something in Azure. And by the way, while we're talking Copilot Studio agents, this pay-as-you-go billing, once set up, can also be used for Dataverse, can also be used for Windows 365, can be used for Power Apps, Power Automate, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll see how this works just as well for all of the other Power Platform tools. And the way we start is by going into portal.azure.com. And there you would have some kind of an Azure billing profile. And you could check out your Azure billing profile by looking within the subscription that you're in. So you would either have a partner that is billing you, and so you might not see a credit card number. If you have your own direct pay to Microsoft, then you would see a credit card number, et cetera, a payment method associated over there. So from the billing profile that is tied into the Azure subscription, you want to make sure that in that subscription, you create a resource group. And this resource group is going to be really important. While it does nothing, it becomes the tying point between the Azure subscription and the Power Platform Admin Center. Because in the Admin Center, you're going to create a billing plan. Now, I'm not just going to kind of read off bullet points. You'll see me go and show you all of those too. And then with the billing plan, you're going to have to choose which Power Platform products you're going to apply to, which environments you're going to apply to. This step gets a little finicky. It's very simple, but it does. I have seen where you add one environment, leave, come back, it's not added. Or you add an environment, you add a second one, the first one drops off, and so on. It's a little bit of I think comedy of errors at times, but if you persevere, you'll find that it actually works quite well. Now, you would also be able to then track usage within the Power Platform Admin Center. You don't have to keep going into Azure. And the most important part of all of this is that if you are building agents with the standard credit pack, the one where you pay $200 a month and you get 25,000 credits with it, there there is a different mechanism for giving users the ability to create agents. It's a free SKU called Copilot Studio User. I'm deviating a little bit from the pay as you go for a second. So there, what happens in the credit pack journey is you get a credit pack, a license called your Copilot Studio Credit Pack or whatever that name is. That is the one that contains the 25,000 credits. That is not assigned to a user. I'll show you that as well. But then what you will instead find is that there is a free license that you will need to get more of if you don't have enough for the makers. There's a zero cost, $0 license that needs to be assigned to the users. And once they have that, they can build. Here in the pay as you go plan, you have an entirely different thing you have to do. You actually, at the tenant level, have to create a security group for Copilot Studio authors. Once you create that, make sure obviously your authors are part of the security group. And then there's another feature that you have to make sure is enabled, which is publish copilots with AI. And then you have to make sure that each user has access to the environment and these following permissions. So let's take a look at how that happens first. Then I'll show you how that contrasts with if you have credit packs. This should help you get over the problem that I feel that I hear. Hey, okay, we got this set up, but we still can't create agents. Or we think we got it set up, but it's not working. Why doesn't my environment show any kind of pay-as-you-go usage? So let's take a look. As I'm pulling this up, you could have a combination of both the pay-as-you-go and the credit pack, because what you would have is maybe the credit pack to get things started, and then pay-as-you-go to kind of supplement that when you run out of your 25,000 credits. So we're going to start first with portal.azure.com. Now in here, you're going to see my subscription IDs and stuff since this is the last live demo. But I trust that we're in a community of friends and nobody's going to do anything malicious. So I'm going to go to one of my subscriptions here. I can't actually remember which of my subscriptions I tied my billing to, but so my billing profile, as a matter of fact, I could even go down here. So over here for the different accounts that I have, I think I have some credits in this account. That's what I forgot when I was bringing this up. But you would make sure first that your payment methods are set up. This is, by the way, I'll go to the payment methods. It's only going to show you the last four credit cards. You'll have a billing profile set up as well for the organization. And once that is set up over here, you can look at, give access to somebody else to your billing profile and so on. This is associated with the subscription that I'm using. And then in that subscription, I would have a resource group that I would create. So let's go into subscriptions and let's go into, I believe it was this one. If not, there's only so many subscriptions I have, so we'll quickly toggle through. I didn't want to bring up the main one for our organization using the Microsoft MVP tenant that I have. There we go. Okay, so in this particular one, I created a resource group called the PAYG resource group. By itself, this resource group does not have to have anything more. It doesn't need to contain any resources. It's just that this resource group is part of a subscription, and the subscription is tied to the payment method I was showing you earlier, which is basically associated with that billing profile. So this is the backend stuff in Azure. A lot of organizations will already have this part done if you're using any Azure resources. So all you really need to do is make sure that there is a resource group, and that resource group is going to be tied. And there's nothing special when you're creating that either. Now, the next thing is we're going to take our journey to the Power Platform Admin Center, so aka.ms/PPAC, or admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com. And over here, there's the menu item called licensing. Under licensing, you're going to have billing plans. Now, this is where you would create a new billing plan. I'm not going to go all the way through this process because I've got one created. But when you choose it, you're going to select an Azure subscription. You're going to give your Azure subscription, this plan, a name, whatever name you want. It's not, doesn't matter. But what does matter is you're picking the right Azure subscription and the right resource group associated with that Azure subscription. And then you would have your meter. So by default, Dataverse is always going to be checked. You would just make sure that you're checking at least Copilot Studio and then potentially some of these other Power Platform apps as well, including Windows 365 for agents. So if you want to do any of those, you can check that. And once you hit your next and then you go save, then you're going to find as you go into this particular billing plan and edit, it will let you choose which environments you want to associate with. As a matter of fact, in the last screen when you're creating it, I think it lets you do that. You see, I've got a target environment. What gets finicky is when you add it, come back and check. You may find that you've gone through the motions, but it doesn't show any target environments. If it doesn't, come back here, hit add or remove, and pick the environments you want to again that you would like to have part of this group. What I've found though is if you've already got one or two that are already showing and you come here thinking you just want to add a third one and you hit update environments, it is going to stop those other two that were there from being covered under this payment, this billing plan. So you have to make sure you check the ones that were already there, plus add anything else that you want to do. Now, once you've done it and you hit save and you went back and you verified, made sure, okay, this is showing, this is great. Now, another way for you to validate all of this is by going right back in here in licensing, and you can check under Copilot Studio, and you can check under environments. Now, under environments over here, what you're looking for is the pay-as-you-go column. Notice this environment is associated with the billing plan, and I think no other environments at this point are. And then also shows the pay-as-you-go consumed. Now, I haven't done much with this environment. I was just building this out to see how much it does or what it does or does not do, if it works. But this is what you're looking for. If it doesn't show yes here, doesn't show you a pay-as-you-go consumed counter, at least a 0, then you haven't done it right, and you'll want to go back and look at that. Also, going back for anybody who hasn't looked at this, on this page, you can see a good summary. You can see how much credit usage has happened across your different agents and so on and so forth. Credit usage by environment, so different ways of slicing and dicing the things that are there. And you can also do some management of Copilot credits. So you can allocate credits. If you had got the 25,000 credits pack, you can allocate them with a max per environment. If you don't allocate, it's just going to allow them to freely use. But if you'd like to allocate it with a cap, it's going to remember that cap and it's going to make sure that it doesn't exceed that cap that's over here. For the Azure pay-as-you-go too, just keep in mind that you can set budgets and you can set caps around that as well to either just give you a warning or to kind of cap off after a certain amount of usage is exceeded. So all of that is this one side, the pay-as-you-go. How do you do the other side of it? What if you wanted to just work with the Copilot Studio credits and your organization got the $200 a month? First of all, it's use it or lose it. So if you don't finish up your 25,000 credits, they don't roll over into the next month. Now, I'm fortunate that in this tenant, I also have that other type of license. So let's go into my M365 admin center. Of course, it's going to be in another place, right? Why would it all be in one place? So we're going to go into admin.microsoft.com or AKMS/Mac. And in here now, I can go into my billing area. And if you are a partner and you're looking at your end customer from a GDAP view, part of what I'm about to show you'll be able to see, and part of it you won't be able to see. As a partner with GDAP privileges, you can always look at licenses. All right, so licenses will show you all the licenses that are available. You might see they had a Copilot Studio viral trial. You might see a user license. If you see a user license, this artifact normally will tell you that they have a credit pack in there. So if this is you as a partner trying to help your customer out, look for this if you see one. Now, these are zero cost licenses. They only appear if you've already got the underarching or the underpinning 25,000 credit license, which itself does not appear here. And a big reason it doesn't appear here, that other line, is because it is not assigned to users. In fact, there is no assignment of that license. It is just there. Its very presence is what gives the credits. And this particular SKU is what you assign to your authors, the people who are going to build out things. And then from here, you're going to go into billing if you're the customer. You can look at rather products, excuse me. And you may have, depending on your relationship with Microsoft, you may have more than one billing account here. So you may need to look at billing account by billing account. So I go over here. Nope, this doesn't look like the one. So I'm going to go down. I believe it was the third one in the list that had it. Third or the fourth. Let this one populate out. Go down some more. There you go. Microsoft Copilot Studio. Available license 1, purchase quantity 1, assigned 0. This is that license that is the 25,000 credit license. So you have this, then you have the user licenses. If you saw, I only had 4 licenses when I went back to the other screen for Copilot Studio User. If you wanted a 5th author, you just go and try to assign a 5th author license right over here. I'd come here to assign licenses, and I would pick another person from the tenant, and it would say, you may not have enough licenses, so it will try to get another license. So go through this process and assign licenses, and it will get you a 5th one. If you're having trouble, I'll work with your partner to procure another one. Or if you're working directly with Microsoft, go to where you purchase licenses. It's a 0 cost license, but they only enable, I think, 1 at a time, or however many users you're trying to assign it to at a time. So this is the other side of the equation. I remembered, though, by the way, that I forgot something when I was showing the pay-as-you-go. I forgot to show some of the tenant side settings that I had in my slide, the Copilot Studio Author, the security group, etc. So let's briefly touch on that. After you create the billing plan, you do need to go into your environments, and you need to make sure that at the tenant setting level, this is often enabled, but in most cases, people don't come here and set a security group. There's another option that is enabled by default. So you can choose a security group. None is not you haven't done anything. You have actively chosen a closed access security group called None, in which case it's open to everybody. Or also all company, which is another kind of thing, a system created thing that is all encompassing. But in most cases, you want to have a smaller group of people that will have access to the ability to create those Copilot Studio agents. So what you'd want to do is make sure you assign a security group, and then in the Microsoft Admin Center, you would go into that particular user account, and you would make sure that that user is associated with that right with that right particular security group. So I'd come over here, go to my managed groups, and then make sure that I'm giving access to the security group in question. So that is going to be very important for you to do. The second thing you will want to make sure that you're doing in this screen, in the tenant settings, come down, and you'll find a publish Copilot with AI features. This is almost always enabled, but I do see from time to time that it can be disabled. So if you're having trouble creating agents, make sure check that this box is checked. And the final no nonsense one, this is again something that most experienced admins will already do every time an environment is created, but this can happen. So let's always go into the environment and look at the user or users that are having problems, and you can check under user see all. Make sure that you choose the user, or make sure first that the user appears here. If not, you want to add the user, and then once you've added the user, you want to make sure that you are giving them some of these roles that are the bot ones. So bot author, bot contributor, bot transcript viewer, and bot viewer. These 4, I think I accidentally did that. So these 4, alongside all the other things that we talked about, will do the trick. So that is the slice, or the kind of the permissions side of things with pay-as-you-go. Any questions? All right. So what I want to do is stay on this theme, and I want to talk then about. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
I have one. It is like tied to environment. So like, do we need to assign a license per user also?
So it is not for users. These are for makers more. So every maker or everybody who's going to be an author of an agent, those people will have to be in that security group. They will need that Copilot Studio author security group. They will need to make sure that they have access to the environment with these permissions, the bot author, bot contributor, transcript viewer, etc. Those are things that anybody who's going to make agents will need. The people who are consuming agents don't need any permissions. That's a different side of the story that we'll talk a little bit about on the Agent 365 side.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? All right. So the next part that I want to talk about is how these credits are used up, right? Whether you have your 25,000 credits or whether you are doing pay as you go, the next part of the question that always comes up is, what is my agent going to cost me? Or even more frequently, I get the, what is it going to cost to make an agent? And after hearing that enough times, that's where I ended up with the, let's just make these guides that I put up on our GitHub repository. Well, let me just go into my github.com/Copilot Studio Saturday. Oh, there's too many comms in there. All right. So here, if I go to my handouts, there's a couple in here that are, I mean, all of them are very much related, but I'll start off first with the sheet and then I'll show you the carousel. The carousel is a shinier one. I think the sheet is packed with more information. So the first way to kind of look at these is that you have three different ways of approaching it. One is the Copilot Studio subscription. As I've found, unless Microsoft changes this at some point in the future, in this particular instance, if you are in Europe and you're paying in euros, or you're in another country and you're paying in your local currency, the price isn't different for you based on region. You see that's what happens for our Dynamics 365 licenses, for Office licenses. Sometimes it's not a kind of a one-to-one match. Different countries will have equivalent but not exactly equal cost to licensing. In this case, however, what I'm finding is that it's basically this dollar amount and whatever exchange rate it is. I don't think they do a spot exchange rate by the day, but it is definitely happening that they are looking at a conversion rate and charging you that much. Same thing with the Copilot credits as well. So you either get the 2,200, it's applied at the tenant level, not to users, not to an agent, and that it is going to expire. The other thing right now is that I've found it's only being billed annually. I think they have an annual commitment monthly term, but I'll go back and check on this again. I should have double checked if they changed anything. In the Microsoft ecosystem, partners know this. End users sometimes don't think about it as well. When you're looking at prices from Microsoft that are publicly available, those numbers are always shown as what you would be paying, the equivalent of what you would be paying if you are on the annual price. Microsoft typically has a lowest price is their annual term, annual build. So then the next level down is annual term, monthly build. And you typically pay about 5% more for that. And then the last one is monthly term, monthly build, and you're usually paying 20% more than the annual term, annual build. So that's kind of the mechanism or the style that Microsoft adopts for that. However, for certain things, they will not allow monthly term, monthly build, or annual term, monthly build. A wonderful example of that is the M3 Copilot, which the enterprise version is not available at monthly unless something has changed very recently. Now, check what happens over here versus what happens over here, right? So here you're paying this as a pack. It's predictable cost, but your things don't roll over. Here you're doing postpaid. So after the month is over, it's going to kind of bill you on how much you've consumed. The most important thing I want you to consider is that you do not pay to build an agent. And I highlighted that in the more shiny guide over here, the LinkedIn carousel. I think there's like a big old image that says on the second page, you don't pay to build agents, you pay to publish them. The cost is for using the agents. The problem, though, is Microsoft will not let you publish an agent unless you have a paid license. It won't cost you anything, but they won't let you publish it unless you have a paid license, either the pay-as-you-go or the Copilot Studio subscription. I mean, here's a third thing that you should keep in mind. If you are building agents that are going to be used by your employees, or your partner and you're building agents on behalf of your customer, and the end users of that agent or those agents are your employees, they would typically access these in Microsoft Teams or in M365 Copilot Chat or maybe in SharePoint. Using a Copilot Studio built custom engine agent in Teams, in Copilot Chat, and in SharePoint will cost them nothing at all. Now, there's always an exception, so there's a little asterisk there. It is subject to fair use. So probably, 2% of tenants usually end up kind of falling afoul of those. It has to be excessive use and so on. The other thing, as I recall, is if you're using certain things like computer using agents, which are new. If you're not familiar with that, we could also make that a topic of a future Copilot Studio Saturdays meetup. So those, or if you are using Prompt Builder in your agents and that prompt builder connects to a model, and that particular model is one that is not a standard one. It's a custom model that you're picking from Azure, maybe a fine-tuned model you have, etc. Those will just get billed for that model usage as would have happened for any other app connecting to it. So there are some nuances there, but by and large, 95% of partners will find that your users will typically not cost them any more to use agents. And I know that M365 Copilot licenses can be between $20 to $30 a month, depending on what type of M365 plan you're on. But keep in mind that you're getting a lot of productivity like the Copilot Cowork, which is very, very strong and agentic. Of course, it's still fairly new and has a lot of room to grow. You get the ability to record your meetings in Teams, get transcripts, get language interpretation, get note taking, and a whole lot more. In Outlook, there's a lot of benefits in Excel. The agentic Excel you now get with M3 Copilot is insane. I've done a lot of trainings on that and customers love it. It's just a lot of opportunity. So there's so much more you're getting. And then on top of that, you're also getting free use of any agents you're building. So I would say that if an organization is building agents for their own team members, you really should consider just getting them M365 Copilot licenses and rolling it out that way. Now, if you're building it for your customers, your prospects, and you're opening this up on your website or your app, etc., then you are going to have some cost. However, one final thought, even though it's zero, you will need one of these at least back hooked. You would typically just go for this. Why would you spend $200 each month when you don't need $25,000 credits? So you do need to kind of give this as a backup plan, set this up, but you won't have anything in the way of consumption for using these agents. That was a mouthful. I'm going to pause. Questions? All right. Now, I've talked about everything in that next box down below. One thing is, oh, go ahead. Yes. Was there a question? Yeah.
One question. So on as you go, is there like the limit we could set for how much we are going to use?
Yes. In Azure, you can set a budget cap that can limit how much you spend. It can be a notification or it can be a hard floor that you can do to limit, but you have to do that on the Azure side. Now, one thing that comes up to is how these credits are consumed and what they cost. How does it work? So if you go to the Microsoft Learn website, which is where I got this table from, you'll find it starts with the cheapest answer is 1 credit. The reality, though, is in today's world, you're never going to have the 1 credit scenario. Why? Classic answers are when you're taking an answer from a topic. So topics used to be the orchestration mechanism of Copilot Studio before we had AI orchestration. It's now called the classic orchestration. What basically would happen, I want you to think of this way. Let's assume you're a company and you have an agent, and your agent is supposed to tell people when your shop is open and closed and what locations you have. Each of those would become a topic. So when the user says anything about location, physical address, geography, it would look for those matching terms, and then it would go inside a topic, and that topic would then be a lot like a flow, fairly deterministic. And you would ask a question, the user would give an answer, or rather, excuse me, the user would ask a question, your agent would give an answer that you've pre-typed in with some placeholders for variables and so on. And each of those was one answer, one credit. What started happening even before AI orchestration came was Microsoft added something called generative answers. So instead of you having to pre-type an answer and fill some slots with variables, you would be able to take whatever the user is asking, point that to a knowledge source or something, and then the AI would, in Copilot Studio, would generate an answer in nice language, and that would be, more user friendly, a variable type of an answer, right? And a little more dynamic, I think, is the word I'm looking for. That is a generative answer, and generative answers are 2 credits. Or if you use the AI orchestration, which is where it decides based on the descriptions of your tools, your knowledge sources, and all the other things you have, what it should use to answer the question, and then it comes up with something, that's going to be 2 credits minimum. But here's where it gets more fun. Let's assume the question that's being asked requires it to connect to another system, or maybe get something from your graph. The graph is like your work IQ or things that are in your Microsoft 365 tenant, things from your SharePoint, things from your email, things from your OneDrive, et cetera, your Teams meetings. Those tenant graph grounding, that could be 10 cents. So one answer could actually be 2 plus some triggers and deep reasoning if that was there, plus 5, plus another 10. Or if you're using agent flows, for every 100 actions in an agent flow, you would spend 13 credits. So for each action, you're basically kind of 13 divided by 100. So you can see how that will add up. I'm not suggesting that that's a bad thing. At the end of the day, here's what I want you to remember. The goal of an agent is to make your human team's life easier. So when you think about it from that perspective, if you're spending a few $100s and that's helping you take away some of the burden from a human, isn't that wonderful? Or at scale, you may spend thousands of dollars, but in those situations, you're probably also eliminating a significant amount of work or possibly reducing the burden that the teams feel. And you look at that from your return of investment calculation. However, if you're just doing this for play and fun, like I try to do with my Only Copilot Fans website, where I have my YouTube channel and where I can write my articles and all that, there I put an agent out there and then very quickly took it off because it was a novelty and I realized people were going in just chatting with it for fun. It was okay, but I was just burning money for no reason at all, right? It wasn't like the agent was adding a significant amount of benefit to me or to the users. So that's where I had to retire that agent because that was going to cost something. So keep that in mind, the way they stack and they add. A final thought on this topic is this. Generally, when people have a credit pack, they will backfill the credit pack with pay-as-you-go when they run out. However, if you are one of those organizations that consume Copilot Studio credits at scale, significantly large usage, then you could actually roll over into another credit pack or another credit pack. So you could buy multiple ones, or you could kind of get a much larger one. There are a few others available, but this is such an exception to the rule that I don't think it warrants a large conversation. If you do have questions about that, reach out to me on LinkedIn and you and I can review the Copilot Studio licensing guide together, and I'll show you how all of that is handled. Some documents that are licensing overview and billing rates management and stuff is over here. And this link is to the Microsoft Credit Estimator. This is a nice little tool they added, but the reality is you are still playing with some unknowns. So if I were to just go and say, I'm going to open this up in another window, Copilot Studio Credit Estimator. Kind of looks like this. You start off by saying, all right, for Copilot Studio, what type of agents you might have, you might do this. And then you start going down the process of, is it a customer facing or employee facing agent? If it's a customer facing agent, then you start going down how many users, what the average is, etc. And it gets you to a reasonable estimate. But the reality is you don't know how people are going to use it. So you can't expect an accurate answer. This is going to be about as accurate as some of the Azure estimators are for different resources that scale based on consumption. So I hope this particular session was valuable. If you have any questions before we move to the next one, I'd love to take those.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, go for it.
Regarding the flows, is it is it charged the same way if I create a flow within Copilot or if I create a flow within Power Automate? Does it use the same amount of credit? Or is it using credits in Power Automate, or is it only when I'm using it in the agent?
That is a wonderful question, and I'm very happy that you thought about that nuance. So let me show you something very quickly. I'm going to try to do this in 1 or 2 minutes. So if I'm in Copilot Studio, all right, and I'm going to pick up one of my flows that I have in an environment. Let's see which of my environments might have a flow, because as you see what I'm showing you, it will start to make sense, and you'll know how you can check what's charging where. So let's go in. Let's hope this environment had at least one flow. Yep, good. Now notice what happens with the overview. When I look at this flow is going to be part of the Copilot Studio plan. And this means it's either exhausting off of credits from a credit pack or from the pay-as-you-go. The other thing that it doesn't readily show over here is that it's also part of a solution. And so this is going to be part of a particular solution that's associated with this, and it's going to place it in either in a default solution or a solution that you create when you make the agents. And then they live inside this environment. Compare this with how Power Automate. So if I go into my flows, let's just pick this environment doesn't. Let's go into, there you go. So let's just pick one of these. This flow runs on owner's plan. So that is your Power Automate per user plan or Power Automate premium user plan. If you haven't known the difference between the two, they cost the same, but the Power Automate premium actually gives you AI builder credits, where the Power Automate per user either doesn't or gives you very nominal ones. Also, these are typically not going to be as part of any solution. Now, I may have placed this in one, but you may not find them. So what you will notice when you go back here, I see 4 flows here, but only 1 flow here. And this flow is common to both. So Power Automate will show you both flows that run on the Copilot Studio plan as well as its own, whereas Copilot Studio will only show you flows that run on that plan. Why does this matter for you, and why should you care? If you are starting an agent and from within the agent you created a flow, and you said that flow is going to be called from within my agent, that will take you to these. And these are going to run agent flows, and these agent flows are going to run on your Copilot Studio plan. However, if you're building a flow from Power Automate, and from here your flow is as a node, let me just see if I can go right in here to one of these and just edit them. I will have, there you go, sends a specific prompt to Copilot for processing. And there, I believe there's a couple of other Copilot Studio nodes that might be available. Here you go. So I can evaluate an agent, get agent test sets. There's some other things that I can do to invoke an agent from here, but predominantly Microsoft's created that dichotomy. So overall, what's happening, I'm speaking for myself here, even though I have a Power Automate premium license that I should probably use, I live so much in the Copilot Studio world that if I just need that one odd flow that I might sometimes need for an agent, but other times I might not, and it's not heavily being used, then I might actually create my flow right over here because it gives me versatility. But if I know I'm going to be using a flow excessively and it's not related to my agents, then I want to go back to my plan, because why would I pay for credits for something I'm paying $18 a month already for on premium? So that's kind of the decision matrix, if it helps.
And from here, you can't say that this flow should use the other.
Not from here. The other way you can. Yeah, no. With Copilot Studio, they block the way. But here,
Okay.
if you're in Power Automate, I can come over here. I can go to Edit, and I can choose. And this is a one-way street. You cannot go back once you've embarked down this road. There is no turning back. So just keep that in mind.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Right. That's always a fun one. The little things that happen when you're working with these different plans. At some point, I have to imagine, look, if I'm reading the tea leaves, that we are going to see everything just come up under Copilot Studio's plan, the pay-as-you-go, because you notice the pay-as-you-go had all the other things. But who knows? Maybe I'm overthinking it. So with that, let's jump into our other topic. And the other topic is Agent 365. Did anybody have any other question? I thought I heard a voice, so maybe no. Just the voices in my head. So let's go ahead and escape this one.
I
And
have one question, sir. I'm sorry.
yes, please go.
Yeah, for this subscription thing, it is like what I'm understanding is it is for the large scale when you're trying to make like working with a company. So you have to get that. And like you said, it was if you want to publish, so we use that. So while creating agents, still we have to get the subscription or no?
Just the pay as you go will be enough. Frankly, this is the way I would look at it. If you know you're absolutely going to use over 25,000 credits a month, then sure, it's a good idea to save about 20% on the cost of those by getting the $200 a month pack, or maybe even getting, another one after the first one exhausts. But for most businesses where there is enough variability or you're just building, I would get the pay as you go, connect your credit card and do that. If you are testing only, you won't incur any credit usage. If you're rolling them out to your M3 Copilot license-based user in Teams or whatever, again, there's going to be no cost, but it needs to have a backup payment method set up ready in case something has to run.
Okay, okay.
Does that answer your
Gotcha.
question?
Oh, yes, it did. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, full disclosure, for the Agent 365 presentation, I borrowed the slide deck from Microsoft, but like most things with, that you get, it's a very salesy pitch. I'll take a few things that are important, and then I'll actually do my own demo. Oh, somebody is waiting in the lobby. Let's admit them. So let's go and start this presentation. So when you see me jumping through the slides, it's not because I don't think it's important. It's just I think a different type of audience that this is made for. And this slide deck I will also make available on GitHub, which I think I forgot to say. As we do our presentations, each month presentation will also be in a repository on that GitHub. So you go to GitHub/Copilot Studio Saturdays, look for like May 2026, and PDF versions of the slide decks will be there. The recording is going to be on the website. The slide decks are going to be on GitHub, so you can get access to all of this goodness right from there. So let's look at, why don't I do a presentation? The control plane for agents. So as I mentioned in the description of the event, Agent 365 is basically the new sheriff in town. And the way I want you to think of Agent 365 is it is to agents what Intune is to device management or endpoint manager, or Microsoft Azure AD or Entra is for humans. Now, Entra is kind of a little more all-inclusive. It touches machines and other stuff as well. But that's kind of one way of drawing a parallel. It does a lot of things. It's capable of a lot, but I will highlight the few most important things that I think that should matter to you. And the pricing mechanism is interesting. I'll be honest, there's one part of the pricing that I am not yet clear on. I have a cloud consult with Microsoft on Monday. I was really hoping that my cloud consult with Microsoft would happen before that. Cloud consults, for anybody who's not aware, if you're a Microsoft partner that's direct, and I think you have its advanced support plan, there are these non-support incidents where we can talk to somebody from the commercial or the product team, and they will work with us to help explain pricing mechanisms, go-to-market mechanisms. Those are very enlightening. Unfortunately, we couldn't get that happen before this meeting. So I will tell you where I'm not sure. I'll tell you what I know for sure, the capabilities I'll explain. And I think if there's more questions that come up later, I'll be happy to meet with you one-on-one as well after the cloud consult's done. So Microsoft uses the word control plane. And if you haven't heard this word being used, control plane, control system, they used it once before when they first introduced the Copilot control system. And that, by the way, folks, is when you go to admin.microsoft.com, you will find in your administrative area, whether you have Copilot licenses or not, you'll find an area called Copilot. There are a lot of things that you can manage and set up over here. Everything from some analytics, if you are using Copilot, some connectors. These are not to be confused with Copilot Studio connectors. This could be a topic for another day, but this is more M3 Copilot specific. Some billing and usage, because there's some things that you can have people who are not paying Copilot users that have some pay-as-go services. And finally, This one's a little important in Copilot settings and the Copilot control system. And that is a lot of features today that Microsoft is introducing, whether it's a research feature, the Copilot co-work feature, etc. They're all part of something called Frontier. And so you have to be a Frontier tenant, or your tenant has to be a Frontier tenant. And you would enable that from here. So I know I'm taking a little bit of a liberty going off topic, but this is important to know. If your tenant does not have Frontier enabled for some users or all users, those users who don't have access to it won't see a lot of things, including at one point in time, there was the Copilot agentic experience for Excel or Word, for instance, or the researcher agent, or now the co-work agent. These have now exited. Co-work is also now out of, I think, the Frontier. It is in GA as of May 1. It's probably just not shown. So you'll be missing out on a lot. So that was for Copilot. Agent 365 is something very similar, but for agents. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. I already hit some slides. I thought this was an interesting one, that by 2028, we will have 1.3 billion agents. Now, here's where I want to add an interesting caveat. And I think Microsoft's also well aware of this caveat, and which is why Agent 365 is important. These 1.3 billion agents are not all going to be productive agents that are actually doing the heavy lifting and the work of your business. Some of these are agents that somebody decided to create and abandoned. Some agents were probably in use once and were never taken to the graveyard, right? They were never properly disengaged. They were not properly deactivated. So somebody just stopped using them. Now you have an agent that has access to various gateways, to various things within your data, and somebody could in the future use them for something beyond what they're intended for. So you have all kinds of issues like that, or deployment of agents. You might run into issues. Who is it going to be deployed for? Where is it deployed? So within your tenant, and you will see an example of my MVP tenant, which has 2 real world users and a whole lot of dummy users. And you'll see how many agents are apparently in my tenant that I didn't know about. And then I'll tell you how we kind of work and adjudicate through that. So we are going to have quite a few, I think, to some, make it easy. And some of the things that we want to know about is, what are these agents? Who published them? Where did they come from? Do these agents have proper guardrails? So an example of proper guardrails here in Copilot Studio, you're well aware when you connect to any source of data, if it's the structured data source, you get to choose if it's going to use maker credentials or end user credentials. We typically use end user credentials unless there is an exception, because with end user credentials, you're ensuring that a user cannot access with AI what they cannot access with UI. So the UI and the AI experience are going to be the same. With maker credentials, whatever the maker's permissions are will apply to anybody using the agent. Sometimes that is needed because the users will not have access to a system. So in that case, maybe you use a maker account that has limited permissions to begin with, or you create other filtering and security mechanisms inside of your agent. Still, what type of guardrails exist within your agents, that is going to be something that you want to track. If not you, the maker, your company's IT department wants to track. How about that? Because I think these are different groups. I've done a session before called Responsible AI, or it was actually navigating the IT dilemma with AI, net balancing innovation and governance. Microsoft has a very similar session. Theirs comes from a different perspective than mine does, but both of them, I think, at the end of it, are all about, it's not just the maker that we have to worry about in the organization. There's a real need for IT and for leadership to understand what's going on. Are your agents protected? Do they have the right access? Can they leak sensitive data accidentally? And then from there, just a reminder, it is now in general availability. So what that means is you no longer have access to Agent 3. So up until May 1st, you were able to test it out. It was part of the Frontier kind of motion. But now it is $15 user. What is definitely short is any IT admin that wants to benefit from this capability is going to need the $15. What is not short is, do individual makers need to have access, or do we need to pay $15 for them as well, or not? I have seen some documentation that alludes to one and the other. If somebody is here from Microsoft, or you're a partner and you have authoritative knowledge from Microsoft because you've had conversations that it is one way or the other, I'll pause. Please unmute yourself and share what you've learned. All right, so I think it's maybe unclear for everybody as well, but I will come back with some clarity after the cloud consult. But at this point, what I do know for sure, your IT admins who want to access all these features, which I'll show you a demo of, they will definitely need to have Agent 365 licensing. That is $15 a user a month, or Microsoft has this new license that's rolled out, the E7, which is like the catch-all license with everything. For $99 a user a month, you get access to everything under the sun that they offer, including Agent 365. That's until, of course, we have E9 a few years from now, I'm sure, right? That's kind of how it's going to work. But there's basically three elements or three dimensions to this. One is to be able to observe, one is to be able to govern, and one is going to be able to secure. Observe, a lot of the observe capability and some of the secure capability is based out of the Microsoft Admin Center. A bunch of the govern and secure portions are actually part of Purview and Entra, etc. So you may find that depending on what your organization is using today, if you're not using Purview, there will be some things that Agent 365 can enable on the govern side that you may not be able to benefit from. Or if you don't have that knowledge, for instance, we kind of say a lot of organizations don't use Purview. So there may be things that you just aren't going to be able to benefit from. I, again, hit some slides. So let's just quickly look at a few things here. 29% of employees have turned to unsanctioned AI agents for work tasks. The word for that is shadow AI. Shadow AI is where, or bring your own AI, BYO AI. This is where people are using AI tools in the workplace. And it's bad enough that you're introducing a technology that probably is not sanctioned by the organization. But what can really hurt is if those are then being given access to your customer data. A lot of times you have NDAs that govern you or that govern this data. And that data could now be used for training a public model. Worse even is that if an employee were to leave, they're leaving with their subscription of whatever tool it was, and you have no way of recovering that information. So they're leaving with business IP, know-how, customer information, etc. So from an IT perspective, there's a lot of at stake here. Another study that I had shown in a different presentation of mine, this one's from Microsoft. That one said about 34% of employers were providing AI tools over to their employees to do the work they had to in the workplace. And these respondents were employees, not the employers. Another 11% said the employer is providing some tools and they're still having to supplement the rest out of pocket. That leaves over 50% of people. Or if you take that other 11% that's a hybrid, almost 60% of people who are reaching into their pocket and paying for AI tools and using those consumer grade AI tools for business work to expose business data. And that should really keep IT people up at night, right? This is going to be very important for us to think about. So the first thing that Agent 365 does is it acts like a registry. And you'll see a little bit of that. I'll show you how this part works. The second part that it does is it helps you measure how effective your agents are, adoption rates, which agents are being used most within your organization, how much credits they're using. So one part of the Power Platform Admin Center is the maker often goes there and sees how much is my agent using. You're going to have the IT admins keep oversight of your agents and this person's agent and that person's agent across the organization. So it'll give some global oversight into the different agents, activity, responses, and credits utilized, and what cost to the organization is all of this happening. The next part is this. This is a very good visual awakener of what Agent 365 can do. And here I'll show you. It basically buckets agents into different categories, things from Microsoft, things that are built with Agent Builder. For those of you who don't know what that is the light agent builder inside of M365 Copilot. It's just for information workers. There's not a lot of things you can do with it, but it will let you do some stuff with that. And it will also let you track other third-party agents that are in your tenant. Now, there's a demo. I'll go to my demo in just a second. Let's give the Microsoft one. On the governance secure, I'll go very quickly because some of this is more on the Purview side. You'd be able to kind of apply governance to them. You'll be able to set DLP, so your policies, your loss prevention policies, and you'll be able to kind of create your tags and the other things that you typically do with Purview. So you would have a DLP or a policy template that's already been created, and you can assign those policy templates to any agent that's being deployed. But what I've found in most organizations that are not using Purview, there are no policies to select. There are no templates. So oftentimes this step in the process becomes a moot point. There's nothing you're actually able to do here. Or you can control what agents can do. And you can see now we've actually left the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. We're not on the Entra side. So this is kind of a different side of governance. You'll also find a couple of the screenshots will take us more into the purview side of tools, etc. So I'm going to just jump through these and let's see if there's anything important under secure that I wanted to cover. I want to save about 5 or 6 minutes. So 73% of organizations say data privacy and security is the biggest AI risk, of course. All right, I think I'm going to go into demo at this point in time. So let's just jump into Agent 365 and where you find it. This is also going to be found in the same place where we found the Copilot control system. So that is my admin.microsoft.com or aka.ms/back. And don't leave, folks. If you want a chance at winning a t-shirt or a hat, you have to stay till the end and we'll do our lucky draw. So we're going to go into agents here. Under overview, this will show you a general overview of the number of agents. Now, I remind you, this is not a tenant with a lot of people. It is me, one real person, then a lot of with Copilot access, and then a lot of fictitious users in there. We did not build 320 agents, so this is going to be real fun. But I do see 2 active users. That makes sense. That actually kind of lines up with what I expect, right? Some pending requests for me. This is an interesting one. When you're publishing an agent and you're making that agent available to everybody, in the past, if you're trying to do that through Teams, you would manage that through the Teams admin. Now you can actually manage those requests right from over here, and you would be able to see that request. And then you would be able to go through the publishing lifecycle. So when you're going through the publishing lifecycle, it will show you who created it, where it came from, what channels it's going to be deployed to. Then I can look at the data and tools, if there's any that are available. Security. This is typically going to be where the lifecycle policies from, the security stuff for Purview and Entra come into play. And this is, I don't really have any templates to apply. And permissions. Why didn't it show that here? This is already updated. Okay. This one isn't showing me the information. They changed a couple of things up over here, but what normally happens is the next step when we're going through the process of publishing, it says, do you want to make this agent available for some users or all users? And if you say some users, you can either select a security group or a user by name explicitly. And if you say all users, you also then have to decide, is it going to automatically install the agent for all of them? Or will they have the ability to choose to take the agent? So if they say they want to be able to choose to roll the agent, they will then find it, for instance, in Teams. Let me just go into Teams really quick here. Hopefully this will not disconnect us. Here in Teams, you'd be able to go down to your apps. And under apps, you would find added by your org and, more importantly, built for your org. This is where approved apps will show up. If it's been preloaded, it will start showing up over here. You may need to search and find and then pin. But anything else that's been approved would show up over here in the built for your org library. Or if in the M3 Copilot chat, then you would find that under all agents. You have your agents. These are ones that have already been enabled by you or enabled for you by Microsoft and then built by your org, and you'd be able to take things from over here. So this is where you can add an agent that's in your tenant that you would like to take a look at. If there's an interest in deployment, full cycle deployment, it's a session I did at Power Platform at community conference. I or another speaker can definitely do that. I think that's probably a valuable topic at some point in time. But coming back in here to Agent 365. So this is one part of the deployment. I promised you a view on Shadow AI. So this is where it can tell you which tools are available and being used as Shadow AI. So OpenClaw is always such a threat. OpenClaw, Claude Cowork, and so on, because they can be both very powerful and potentially destructive to your data. So if it is in use, it will start detecting that with any user who's using that on a work machine. Other tools will start showing up as well. So if they start using third-party AI tools that are being used and they're accessing it through your business network, you'll start seeing them over here. So this is going to be a good place. This is just starting. The other aspect is when you look at all agents, I want you to go to map. This is a fun view. This really puts a visual to what's going on. So you saw I had 300 some agents. So what's going on here? Microsoft had 27. So if I zoom in, some of these are first-party agents that are actually built in. I wouldn't want to get rid of the Word agent or the PowerPoint agent, but there might be some others like Researcher, etc., that are in here. So if I don't want to have people access to this, you can actually disable access to some of these agents as well. You have full ability as an administrator to do that. Come here. This is another type of a tool called the Agent Toolkit. This is like Copilot Studio, but it's a little different. So I was building something here. That's my one solitary agent. I have my Copilot Studio. This has a lot of agents. So come on, why are you growing? Doesn't want to. There you go. It finally came around. Here I will see all of my different agents, but I might also see some templated agents that Microsoft has created that we have enabled. So this is a good way to see everything that's in there. And then finally down here, the third-party agents, there are in fact a couple of others too, but the third-party agents are the ones that I want to highlight. These are in your tenant. This doesn't mean they're actively working. So there are 148 third-party agents that were, but none have been enabled. So that's why it's showing 0. Okay, it doesn't want to show anything here. Pre-GA, it would show all of them. So these typically come ready to enable within your tenant, and a user can enable them inside of Teams, for instance. So if you were to go in here and you are looking at the library of apps, you might want to find something else that's not built for your org, but other agents, and you can go agents we love, and you might pick one of these. So these make up those third-party agents that are pre-inserted in here. Agent Builder is stuff that you're building with M365 Copilot Chat. So here with Copilot Chat, as you're doing, you could say new agent. It's a describe to create process, and it will let you just add knowledge sources, not much else. Knowledge sources, it can do some file crunching and some suggested prompts, but it can't do a whole lot more. Limited connectors, limited capabilities. So that is the Agent 365 overview. If you, as an organization, are building agents and you have an IT department, if you're not very small, you should really consider this at least for 1 or 2 IT admins to see what's going on, so that as more and more people start building agents in this kind of, this area of unused agents with connections are sticking around, you'll be able to get a grasp on them or a grasp on them. So as we wrap up, let me do a couple of things and then I will stop for questions with anybody who wants to do it. I want to make sure that we do the draw. And before we do that, let me bring back one other thing here. If you would like to get a hold of me, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And here's my QR code, or just search for me by name, or YouTube. That's where I have my Only Copilot Fans channel. Only Copilot Fans is the kind of thing that is bringing Copilot Studio Saturdays to you, or my email address as well. All of that's well and good. But I also want to remind you that our next event in English is June 20th. Please take a moment to join the community. And please take a moment to register. That registration form's already up. So here's how we're going to do the draw. I have, for everybody that's registered, a list here in Microsoft Teams. I'm not going to kind of show everybody's emails. Let me just bring up a little bit over here to show without emails. 31 people apparently. So hopefully you're seeing a part of it. You're seeing names without people's emails out of privacy. So everybody has a number associated. I am going to do a random number generator pick between 1 and 31. If it's me, of course, I don't win. If the person whose name's called out isn't here, they don't win. And so we'll do this for 2 prizes, and you are going to get to choose what you get. So one of those is a limited edition, a Copy t-shirt. It's going to have Copy flying, and there's going to have the first event or something like that on there, which we won't make again. So it'll be a one and done edition. Another thing that you could also ask for is the hats. So let's go down under here. So if you would like one of that type of hat, we'll work with you. So let's do the draw, and if you win, then I'll get in touch with you and make sure that we get that out. So 2 people are going to get it. Let's bring up M365 Copilot and let it do a simple random generator. I want you to pick a number between 1 and 31. It's really thinking. Number 17. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Abinash, are you still here?
Yes.
All right. So you are one of the winners. Congratulations. And then we're going to do one more
Yes.
draw. Yeah. Pick one more. 23. So 6 down from Abinash. Let's go down to 19, 20, 21. Gert Hector, you're still here.
Yeah, I'm still
All
here.
right. All right, perfect. So I'll get in touch with y'all on it. For everybody else, feel free to download the swag and the digital swag. There's going to be this. We'll also have the store link available and mapped to our Copilot Studio Saturdays site. So if you want to buy some gear, you're welcome to buy gear as well. Once again, if you want to speak, please let us know. Please go on the website and let us know. And now I'll open up the floor for questions. Or if I forgot anything I promised I would do, remind me and we'll touch on that as well. Were there any questions about Agent
AJ, this was
365?
an awesome presentation. So I just have a clarifying question concerning some of the resources. You mentioned that, especially for the Agent 365, that presentation is directly from Microsoft, correct?
Correct. I got it from the partner.microsoft.com where you look at the marketing resources, and I download that from there. And like I said, I'm going to take that and I will make that available on the GitHub repo as well.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. I'm working with an organization and they're kind of just getting started with Copilot and everything. And
Sure.
I'm pretty sure that's going to be I know there's going to be a huge issue with using the third-party app. So I think that will be very beneficial for that team. So I want to know about that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Kiran, your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. This is informative. I joined a little late. How do I get to the GitHub repo where you're thinking about posting the material?
Good question. So it is going to be on github.com/Copilot Studio Saturdays. It's a little long, but one you can't forget, right? So right over here, we have our handouts. These are some that I used for one of my presentation. I'll create another folder called May 2026 English, and the 2 slide decks that I have, they're separated. I'll put them in here together, and here's where you have digital swag, etc.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep. And recordings, as a reminder, I had said that before, recordings are going to be, so at this point, I think if I were to refresh the page, this drops off, goes up into past events. And in a little bit, once I have the YouTube video finalized, that will show up right over here for you to be able to watch the YouTube videos. All right, folks, thank you so much for being a part of this event. And I hope to see you again in June. And yeah, stay safe. Enjoy the start of some beautiful spring weather. And tell your friends about it. Let's get the word out. Have a good one.